Hello everybody and welcome to a December special Christmas edition of Readings. My name is Terence Toh and I will be your host for today's session. Thank you so much to Sharon Baka for inviting me and for also organizing this awesome session. Now, since it's the Christmas season, boy do we have a special treat for you. We've got not one, not two, but 5 wonderful authors, all local, to read for you their works today. And remember, if you can't find a good Christmas present, the best is always a broken drum, because you just can't beat it. Ha 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 ha. Okay, anyways, yeah. Starting us off, we have, coming from the exotic shores of Ipoh, a writer and poet whose work often focuses on the experiences, issues, and identity conflicts of all those in the Indian diaspora. Paul Gannaselvam's first collection of short stories, Lata's Christmas and Other Stories, was first published in 2013. His poems and short stories have been published locally and internationally in e-magazines, anthologies, and literary journals. His upcoming short stories will be published by Penguin Random House in the first quarter of 2021, and he currently lectures at University Tunku Abdul Rahman, the Perak campus, West Malaysia. So, please take it away, Paul Gannaselvam.
Right. Hi everyone. Thank you, Terence Toh, for the introduction, and thank you, Sharon Baka, for inviting me to read at Saxons again this year. It is good to see everyone, and I really hope that everyone had a wonderful, blessed Christmas with your loved ones, and I hope that everyone is keeping safe. Yeah. All right. So today I'm going to read a poem, and probably a little bit of introduction on myself as a poet. Of course, I did poetry in university and whatnot, but I've never written poetry until my visit to Siem Reap in 2013. It all came that my first poem was actually re-engineered, rewritten, or probably revised from a reflective prose that I wrote about my visit to Angkor Wat in 2013. And my good friend Martin Bradley actually told me to prepare that text to be read out for a group of artists in Colours of Cambodia. Now, after reading that, I just plucked out a few words here, there, and everywhere, and minused the sentences and all that, and actually composed a poem out of it. And it went on to be published in Colours of Cambodia 2014 and the Dusun e-magazine 2014, and it was republished in Malakai Advin's Malkin Testament anthology in 2016. Right, so that's how I started writing poetry. For me, poetry is pretty much experimental, and it is very much experiential, because I write a lot about my experiences of being in a diaspora. Alright, and I write poems from pretty much from the I persona. It attracts me because I think it helps me to explore. Of course, I dwell, and definitely it helped me to explore into the many political and social markers that exist in our community, that exist in our society. So probably it helps to locate myself in those markers, and then I could analyze and provide opinions and perspective which are very direct and straightforward. Now, I also found that when you use the I persona, it helps me to travel into different bodies, all right, to explore symbolisms and things like that. I definitely experimented with one of those poems that appeared in SARE, University Malaya's English language journal, the poem entitled Openness, that talks about women liberation, that was a theme actually. So it helps me to get into other bodies, and I suppose that it also helps me to immerse in other bodies and explore concepts and ideas and pretty much put my experiences into perspective. I am still experimenting, and probably since 2013 I have started publishing poems and um, e-magazines, anthology, and definitely in international journals. So I am still publishing. And no, I don't write 10, 20 poems a year. Um, Probably one or two poems, two or three poems, but they are pretty much, very much diasporic, and they're pretty much like what I say, they are all connected, interconnected to the existing political and social markers. Okay, so today I am going to read a poem entitled White Christmas. And so I think I'm selecting this poem because I think it suits the season. And definitely this is my own reflection about what Christmas is. I'm analyzing what Christmas is for an Indian Christian and how it is celebrated in an Indian household. And our lives are pretty much affected by the cultures that we live in. And definitely how this Christmas is very different from the commercialized Christmas that we see today. All right, okay, and definitely from Western traditions. So I am actually explicating this from a very, very traditional Indian point of view, and this is my take on the White Christmas. This was published in Post-Colonial Text in the year 2018. All right. Okay, White Christmas. Our Christmas is not white, though we have been christened by whites, baptized and reborn, purified like clarified butter in a language we will one day colonize. Our Christmas was never white, for the monsoons kept it dark and menacing, past the many sea crossings, schemed and maneuvered by the kings of the East Indian Company into lands our Rajas once ruled. Our Christmases were never white, though we waited at Burmese teak desks, pulled wide sheets of woven reeds, and tiptoed about the stately residences, abandoning the pungent taste of toddy for fine liquor. Our Christmases were never white, but bustling we were, to keep our masters important and happy, their eyes sparkling jade, like lush green carpets of tea and rubber, even baking cinnamon-scented fruitcakes and chewberry biscuits amid the stuffy offices overrun by peons and mandos. Our Christmases are rather coloured, for we make it up with fake Santas and induced snow, stunted sledges but surreal reindeers, plastic baubles and made-in-China fir trees, and the season announced at shopping malls a fortnight before Advent, the real story untold and forgotten. Our Christmases are coloured, that it disturbs the eyes. Midnight masses, a glitterati of silk saris, jippas, and 916 gold. Benches brimming with seasonal visitors, the timely repeat of dusty hymnals, the altar crawling with wines and berries. The star of Bethlehem dazzling alone in a vacant sky. Our Christmases are tangy and spicy, sure to sear your tongue and burn your throat. Flu, sores, and ulcers are definite after features. We curry the goat, chicken, and turkey, an offering interspersed with adulterated biscuits that stay for all seasons, a chimuruku and adarasam for good tidings, and all things good to fill our platters aplenty. Our Christmases are colored. Though we are merry and gay, our sharings are besieged by the rising cost. Our merriment moderate. Our homes are open to those selected from last year's guest list, or we just decide on a vacation, leaving our homes under key and lock. Our Christmases are colored, streaked with a strange shade of grey, from those whispering that the cross be rendered unseen and noiseless, a necessary license to believe in Christmas, of He who came to call upon the blind and the deaf. Our Christmases continue with off-whiteness in a shade of our very own. Thank you very much, everyone. And here's wishing you and wishing everyone a very happy new year, and definitely a world free of COVID, and definitely for good tidings and glad tidings. Yeah. Until then, we meet again. Keep safe, and thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you so much, wasn't that just great? And now, moving along, for our second reader, we have Yana Hasri. Yana is a Malaysian writer and poet. Her works have been published in local and international magazines and publications, including ISUU Mag, Eccentrica, and Metaphors. Her first poetry chapbook, At Night We Come Out, was published in 2018, and she's currently working on her second collection of poetry, Ruminants. So watch out for that. She works as an editor for The Star and has translated fiction and non-fiction books for prominent Malaysian authors and personalities. I can't wait to see what she's got. So take it away, Yana Hasri.
Hi everyone, my name is Yana, and first of all, I'd like to thank Terence To for the introduction, and also a big thank you to Sharon Bakar for inviting me back to do another round of readings. I am primarily a writer and an editor. I've worked in various magazines and publications in Malaysia. Right now, I am an editor with the Star newspaper. Today, I'll be reading a few of my own poems. So let's start with the first one. It's a poem inspired by Greek mythology and astronomy, specifically the legend of the 7 heavenly sisters, who were very desirable and had lots of suitors. And eventually they were turned into a star cluster that we know today as Pleiades. And this poem is from the point of view of one of their spurned lovers. It's called The Song of the Green-Hearted Fool. At night, the disconsolate lover takes a slow walk under the stars. With every step, he gathers moonflowers in one hand and voiceless words in another, his feet gliding like whispers against the pavement caked with other tales of love denied. And when his heart bursts green from the grip of heartache, he turns to the sky and sings, 7 sisters, 7 sisters, why will you love me not? 7 sisters, 7 sisters, say you will not forget. At dawn, the lover will turn back into a boy, and his heart will settle into its bottomless hole. But for now, he will hang his love on the jagged fence and lay down in the shadow of Orion and the 7 sisters, to sleep the pale sleep of unrequited passion, the ghost of his desire reflected, quiet in the stars. Second poem I'm going to read is, this one is my attempt to tackle a scene of an abusive relationship. I was pondering about the silence that many women who are in abusive relationships suffer, and I also wanted to do a sort of wordplay on the idea of silence and the shapes it can take. So this poem is titled Shh. What is the shape of a silence about to be reckoned with? Slender, like the leather belt he used to whip you. Round, like your eyes when he punched you. Square, like the corner he trapped you in. Flat, like the wall you cowered against. Until the silence reared its head and whispered its true shape into your ear. Slender, like the strength of your will. Round, like his mouth in a mute panic show. Square, like the grave you now return him to. Flat, like the earth that will reclaim his sorry body. The third poem I'll be reading is called A Bedtime Story, and this is basically about a mother who is preparing to read a bedtime story to her son, her young son, and she's also thinking about all the undercurrents of being a parent to a young child and a mother's hopes and fears about her child growing up safely in a dangerous world. So here goes. First, let me warn you. Of course, the monster under your bed is real. A fragment of fear a day keeps the protector away. Outside, the night wind laps up dreams freshly discarded. Outside, a man cries for the family he cannot feed. And a cat bats a dead bird around the coldness of things the daylight won't touch. Still, you want your bedtime story. A beacon in the dark only a child can wield. Tonight I'll tell you the story of the boy whose mother grew spears out of roses, whose headscarf unfurled around his skin like a silken shield, and whose songs kept him safe for a short and precious hour. Maybe one day, when you have forged your own shield, I will tell you why sometimes those who fear turned into the feared, and why the monster under your bed sometimes flickers with my face. The last poem I'll be reading is it's called Resolutions, and it's basically about my just a random collection of musings about my hopes and wishes for the year 2021, which cannot possibly be any worse than this year. Fingers crossed. Resolutions. In this new year, I hope to be a woman undefinable. That when I walk down the street, I will light anew the path 100,000 women before me toiled to build. I hope it will be clear that I am a woman of my own making, and not your pale dictation of what a woman should be. I hope the men who call themselves fathers and leaders tell their sons it is always okay to cry, and to lead their people by example, and not by the weight of the gold lining their pockets. I hope mothers let their children find their footing in this big, wide world when the time comes, and that running a household on fear is the same as setting it on fire. I hope that the godly and the godless can see the beauty of commonalities in bloom, and that churches, mosques, and temples are all houses of the faithful. I hope touches and hugs will no longer be rare commodities, that a family will not have the rancid taste of mortal fear souring their meals. In this new year, I ask that my mother tongue finally take root in my soul, after a lifetime of being strangers, and that this tired trope of using a colonizer's language dies a quick and forgetful death. And most of all, Most of all, I ask for the love of the few and the safety of the many, and a chocolate or two to go with the view. Well, that's all from me today. Thank you again to Sharon and Terence and also Param for helping to edit these videos. And I'd also just like to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas. Hope everyone had a great celebration, and also Happy New Year, and here's to a better year. Bye!
Thank you so much, Yana. And now we move on to our third reader, who is a very well-traveled reader. Tutu Dutta is the wife of a Malaysian diplomat who has lived in far-flung cities around the world, such as Singapore, Lagos, New York, Havana, and Zagreb. I had to look up some of these places to find out where they were. She is a writer of children's and young adult literature. She has a bachelor's in science in environmental science from University Putra, Malaysia, and a master's from the University of Malaya. Not only that, she's the author of 10 books, including Phoenix Song, Timeless Tales of Malaysia, and Nights of the Dark Moon. She has co-edited The Principal Girl, an anthology of feminist-leaning tales with Sharifa Aisha Osman. And her latest book, The Blood Prince of Lanka Suka, is supposed to be out in February 2021, but advanced copies have already been out. I have read this book and I gotta say, it's a great read, you guys. You just gotta read it. And now, let's have it. Thank you so much, Tutu Dutta.
Thank you for the introduction, Terence. This is Tutu Dutta, the author of The Blood Prince of Lanka Suka, published by Penguin Random House Southeast Asia. This is a reimagining of the legend of Raja Bersiung, who was supposed to have lived in ancient Lanka Suka and who is said to be a vampire. So in his interview with me for the Star, Terence actually asked me how I knew about this legend. This took me by surprise because I had assumed that the Raja Bersiung is actually a part of our collective memory, but it now appears that there are many young Malaysians who have never heard of him. So I hope they get to pick up this book and find out a little bit more about the legend. I'm going to read the excerpt from the first chapter, The Night of the Blood Moon. He sighed with exasperation, narrowing his eyes until only dark irises were visible, and a slight frown creased the perfection of his smooth brow. Raja Mahaparita Derya, Prince of the Blood and heir to the throne of Lanka Suka, was getting irritated. When he spoke, his smooth and cultured voice was devastatingly contemptuous. Why are we taking so long? We are merely dressing for a night in the town, not for battle. His servant, a nervous young man, was helping him to put on his breeches. On it, curling fern leaves were to circle each arm, wrought in gold and studded with tiny diamonds to mimic spores. They tended to draw attention, but the prince was reckless in his indifference to danger. Situated on a hill overlooking the sea to the west, the town of Kota Au had its fair share of brigands and robbers, and even some pirates, but Raja Parita was confident that no one would dare to challenge him, and even if they did, he would outfight most of them. The servant finally managed to close the catch of the bracelet on his right arm, but his fingers fumbled with the catch on the second bracelet. Sensing Raja Parita's growing impatience, his hands trembled even more, and beads of sweat formed on his brow. When he tried to close the catch, the bracelet dropped on the floor with a heavy thud. The prince said brusquely, "Must you be so clumsy? Why do I always have to put up with such incompetence?" The servant, who was kneeling on the floor to pick up the jewel, apologized, his voice quivering. "Please forgive me, my lord. Your humble slave promises to do better." Raja Parita held up his hand and said imperiously, "Enough, just put it away and leave us. I can dress myself." In fact, he was already dressed in sleeveless tunic and loose black silk trousers. On top of the trousers, a brocaded green silk scarf was elegantly draped around his waist and held in place by a silver belt. The two ends of the cloth fell in front in carefully folded pleats. The prince threw on his outer garment, a jacket of matching green silk, and strode out of the palace determinedly. The magnificent wooden palace rested at the very top of Kota Aur and was nestled in the midst of a large garden of rare flowering plants, orchids and ferns, and tall shady flowering trees. A stream bearing crystal clear water flowed downhill at one end of the garden into a rock pool. A high wooden parapet surrounded the sprawling palace grounds. The cool evening air refreshed him, and Raja Parita walked down the tree-lined path in the garden in a much better mood. The garden path led to the rear gate of the palace. Outside the gate, another path led down the hill to the town. Closest to the palace resided the Bangsawan, the lesser royalty and nobility of Lankasuka. A second, larger circle comprised dwellings owned by wealthy merchants and palace retainers. Towards the west, where the port was, were warehouses, a metal smithing foundry, and a few brick firing kilns. Tall, shady trees grew everywhere, even around the foundry and kilns, and gave Kota Aur the look of a massive landscape garden. On the eastern side of the hill were tradesmen and their shops, elegant tea houses, and spacious temples with courtyards. Further inland were the villages and extensive rice fields laid out with checkerboard precision. Furthest of all were the dark primal forests with green tendrils snaking their way into human settlements. The town was called Kota Aur, or Bamboo City, because the site used to be covered with bamboo forests. Aur being the name of a giant species of bamboo which grew to massive heights with stems the size of a man's thigh. The giant bamboo forest had been felled a long time ago, but vestiges of it still remained in the untouched forest which surrounded the kingdom. Although it was after nightfall, a full blood moon illuminated the terrain with startling clarity. 3 young men were waiting for Raja Parita at the palace gates. Their elegant dress and casual confidence signaled them out as noblemen of the kingdom of Lankasuka. Chula, Satra and Yala were young noblemen who had a penchant for nightlife. They were also his closest friends. The prince told the guards to wait for him at the gate. He didn't want them to follow him. The 4 friends divided their time between hunting in the forest and frequenting tea houses owned by rich merchants from across the sea. The prince and his friends were popular in the tea houses and always welcomed. They were young and carefree, with dark shiny eyes, tawny skin, and lean strong limbs from hours spent outdoors. All 4 were admired for their physical prowess. They were proficient with weapons and accomplished hunters, but none was as skilled as Raja Parita. His prowess bordered on the preternatural. Many say it was a legacy from his mother, who was rumored to be a Rakshasa princess. Others say she was descended from the Orang Bunyan, the fair folk. The more prosaic even claimed that she was an Orang Ulu princess, a member of the hill tribe from Mount Jerai. But whatever her origins, no one disputed her extraordinary beauty. His father, Raja Sri Indrawangsa, was descended from the most ancient ruling house in the land. While both parents were proud of their only son, they often wished that Raja Parita would mend his wild and reckless ways. The prince turned towards his companions and asked rhetorically, "Who shall we honor with our presence tonight?" His voice had a rich timbre which contrasted with his youthful looks. In fact, he was only 17 years old and the second youngest in the group. Chula replied, "The moon tonight is blood red in color, my lord. I would advise caution. We should stick to our favourite haunts, the green jade tea house close by. Yala burst out laughing, his eyes alight with amusement. He was a wild child of the group, outgoing and free-spirited, he said boisterously. Chula is always advising caution even when there is no moon at all. I say we go to the Whispering Bamboo tea house at the edge of town. I've never heard of this tea house before. Is it new? Satra asked, sounding intrigued. Yala always seemed to know what was going on in quarter hour and always came up with the wild ideas. He could be impatient and disdainful, but he was never boring. Yala said with good-humoured contempt, "You're such a hermit, Satra. The Whispering Bamboo tea house has been around for ages." He lowered his voice and whispered, "We should really pay it a visit. Especially since rumour has it that the forest near the tea house is haunted by a puaka which takes the form of a beautiful young woman." This time Chula interjected in a sharp voice, "Yala, why would you even suggest such a frightful idea on a night like this?" Before he could finish the sentence, a sudden gust of wind blew around them, rustling the leaves in the nearby trees and shaking loose white-scented flowers. The prince felt a stir in his heart and his pulse quickened. He suddenly decided to agree with Yala. Life has been so stifling lately. I could do with a bit of adventure. Let's go to the Whispering Bamboo tea house. Okay, that's all for now. Thank you for listening to me. And I would like to thank Sharon Baka and Param Nathan from the Readings group. And also thank you to Terence Cho for being our host. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you so much, Tutu. That reading definitely gets a 10-10 for me. And now, we move on to the fourth author, Elizabeth Wong. Elizabeth grew up in the quiet suburbs of Kuala Lumpur and is currently working as a geologist in London, UK. What can I say? That job rocks. She is interested in stories of Malaysia and also of this large world we live in, including deserts, seas and rocks. She used to be the founder and editor of Inky Hands, an e-zine to promote new writing for young Malaysians. She has a bachelor's in science from Yale University, USA, with a double major in geology and English, and a master's in petroleum geology from Imperial College, London. Her first novel, We Could Not See the Stars, will be published by John Murray Press on June 2021. And the story she will now be reading, All Lonely Roads Lead to Old Sembanang, was recently nominated for the Pushcart Prize. And so, take it away, Elizabeth Wong.
Hi, I'm Liz Wong, and today I'll be reading an excerpt from my short story, All Lonely Roads Lead to Old Sembanang. The full version is published in Sinking City Lit Mag, if you want to read it all. So here it goes. All lonely roads lead to Old Sembanang. There were roads in Sembanang that have not felt the hum of cars in a while. These roads were now cracking apart into hexagons, with weeds forcing themselves into broken spaces where hot bitumen was once laid. Now the mangrove swarm encroached. No one has used these roads, not since the flood. No one other than runners, scientists, scout troops on expeditions, and of course, themselves. The two of them have spent many a Saturday on a green glass beach when they were younger. They took the road Jalan Changkat Beras that ran through the artificial rivers and lakes of Mr. Tan's prawn farms and passed by a row of makeshift huts, zinc sheets slapped together to form homes for Mr. Tan's Burmese workers. The zinc sparkled in the afternoon heat and scorched their hands when they touched it. And then the road wound around a cluster of fish warehouses where the fish was sorted before being carried away to the capital on shoals of ice in dirty grey styrofoam boxes. In the morning, wooden boats powered by diesel engines brought in the fish and hoisted their catch with slings into the warehouses by noon. They would stop by at the warehouses to help with the sorting. Big fish goes in one pile, medium fish goes in another, small fish goes in another pile, and weird fish goes in the weird fish pile. Their hands, shoes, clothes would be stained with fish ooze, but they got a free lunch. Packed nasi lemak with fried egg and anchovy bits. After their lunch, Jalan Changkaberas would take them further, away from people, to an old railway line that led onward to the beach. They had used to skip unevenly across the wooden sleepers, from one road to the other. The entire journey took 48 minutes one way, according to Kevin, reading off his black Casio wristwatch with a tiny calculator. He got his watch when he was 11 for doing well in his exams. And if they ran all the way there, their journey only took 28 minutes. But their return home took much longer as they walked home carefully. Otherwise, the beach glass would break and they would have gone there with nothing to show for it. Nothing but a memory of their day, scouring for, selecting and saving the best pieces of beach glass. She had visited the green glass beach only once, ever since she came back from the capital after finishing university. There was nothing lonelier than walking on a 48-minute trail, once with company and now by herself. Nowadays, she spends her Saturdays volunteering at the Buddhist Children Playgroup, BCP, a 10-minute drive from her home. It was not a perfect substitute, but the feeling of helping another person could offset memories, or at least help her forget. At the very least, she was too busy handling the kids to think about anything else. Last year, sometime in May, she and another regular volunteer, it was that woman with the jutting chin whose name she could never remember, had taken a group of BCP kids out to the green glass beach. Bringing lunch, first aid kits and handphones with them, they walked the same road that she and Kevin had once walked every Saturday. The kids spoke too loudly. Their blaring voices overwhelmed whispers of the mangrove, the sighs of unanswered footprints. When they arrived at the beach, she explained to the kids where this beach glass comes from and how they were formed. She taught them how to choose the best specimens and was horrified when they collected the flattest ones only to skip them across the water. She never took them there again, or suggested the green glass beach to anyone. Her cousin and her Angmo boyfriend had stopped by Sembanang 2 months ago as they were doing a grand tour of amazing Malaysia and wanted to visit a quaint, charming place in the rural countryside. Something not too touristy, her cousin had requested. And so she pointed them to the direction of a beach resort 20 minutes away. At any rate, no one went near the green glass beach unless they were scientists or foreign tourists. People said that it was haunted, a dirty place. You should shower after you go there to get rid of any evil spirits that have clung to you. You should never read messages in a bottle, because that is how spirits try to communicate with you. She didn't believe the superstitions, but she understood their essence and how they came about. There is something about sitting on the green sand, waves lapping at your toes, the whole sky unfurling wide open over you that breeds the belief that there are things, forces in the world bigger than you are. Everything that has happened in the entire history of the world, every death, every flood, every job, every farewell, every childhood love lost, lingers in the surrounding hills, in the drowned valley, in the green glass beach. What was she then? A microscopic glimmer in a world where nothing ever changes. In many ways, she was comforted by that realization. On the day her Amma died, she had found a bottle washed up on the beach and hidden in a cluster of phragmites. The bottle was battered, but there was a message inside, smeared, almost unintelligible. But she could very nearly make out the top, 1859, which would make it over 150 years old. 150 years of floating in the ocean. It seemed almost meant for her that she should find it on the day her grandmother died, when life seemed transient. She and Kevin had never told their families where they went on Saturday mornings, because they wouldn't let them go there otherwise. Her mother would tell her that all these bad spirits will try to find a place in your soul and control you, and you'll never be free. Looking back, their families had probably let them both do what they wanted on Saturdays, because they were hoping that they would fall in love, get married. He's such a nice boy, her father would tell her, so filial and obedient, respects his elders. He will make a good husband. They had gone to the beach for the sole reason of collecting beach glass. Every Saturday, they would empty their backpacks of schoolbooks and use them to carry beach glass home. Beach glass is ordinary glassware, beach bottles and glass jars that has found its way to the sea. There it is whipped by waves and crushed against rocks and passing ships before being left behind on beaches far away from where it came from. Imagine you find a seemingly perfect green sphere. It is the size of a marble. It is sitting on your palm still. It is the product of everything that's happened until this very moment, blown in a glass factory somewhere, used by someone, found its way into the sea, churned around in storms, washed up on a beach, and now picked up by you to sit on your palm still. It has seen fish, bits of wood, and household rubbish floating in the sea, surface eddies, and weed. Crystallographically speaking, it is unnatural. Minerals do not naturally grow into spheres. Its crystal system is not in the charts. Microscopically speaking, it is flawed. Glass is a supercooled liquid with no long-range structures and no symmetry and no order. Although glass may look solid, it is actually a liquid and can flow at very slow speeds, unnoticeable to the eye. After several millennia, this glass sphere would have flowed into another shape altogether. But in terms of a human lifetime and to human eyes, this glass sphere is perfect. I'm going to stop here for today because I think I'm at my time limit. So thank you all for listening and have a good day.
Thank you so much. That was great. Well, it has been such a wonderful session, don't you think? Such lovely writing from some amazing writers, but all things unfortunately have to come to an end. And now it's time for our last writer, who is certainly not least, Dina Zaman. Dina is known to the public as a columnist and a writer. Her real life sees her in the past 6 years as the co-founder of Iman Research, which focuses on regional protective security, whose pillars are society, beliefs, and perception. I also must say, I've really enjoyed reading her books over the years, especially King of the Sea. That's probably one of my favorite pieces of Malaysian writing. She's writing a collection of essays on Malay identity and wants to write on her family history. And so, today at Readings, can we please welcome Dina Zaman.
Hi, I'm Dina Zaman, and I write occasionally. I used to write for the Malaysian Insider, the Malaysian Insight, the Malay Mail Online, Malaysia Kini, you name it. And then in 2015-16, I ran off to co-found a think tank called Iman Research with my friends. So, during the MCO, Amir Muhammad contacted me and said, do you kind of want to republish I Am Muslim? And I said, no, only because I don't like looking back at the past. Once you're done, you're done. But I wouldn't mind doing a little bit of it and do a short collection of what it means to be Malay. So I'm going to be reading out 2 drafts, right? The first 2 chapters. I hope you'll be greatly entertained by them. It's been a while since I wrote. So, Chapter 1 of I Am Muslim Redux, Malaysia. In 1998, the then Deputy Prime Minister of Malaysia, Anwar Ibrahim, was arrested for sodomy. I was working for Astro, then a fledgling broadcasting station. Being in the commissioning department and production, we worked long hours. So one early morning, I was walking to the studios from the car park, and I had this odd sense that everything was going to change for the worse. I wasn't even political then. I was like many young women in KL who just want to earn good money, married men from the same family and economic backgrounds. I had applied then for the British High Commissioner Chevening Scholarship for an MA in creative writing, with a dream of writing and crafting the great Malaysian novel, which never happened. I wrote I Am Muslim in 2007 instead. I was waiting to hear if my application was successful at that time. And at the studio that day, I picked up the Malay newspapers to read the headlines blaring, Anwar liwat. Now, we didn't have the internet nor mobile phones. I think we did have an internet, so I shot off an innocent email, if you can call that, to a friend. Liwat tu apa? As I drove home that afternoon, I noticed that a lot of drivers in the Sri Kembangan area were looking up. It was a wonder that I didn't hit the car in front of me. I too looked up and saw helicopters. There were quite a number of them, and the whirring of the blades could be heard. It was menacing, and me being me, I entertained the idea, a very frightening idea of one of the helicopters crashing on me and the car that I was in. My family and I lived a few roads behind Anwar Ibrahim's home in Damansara Heights back then. I panicked as I inched back home, as swarms of people and their cars had blocked all access, and there were placards shouting for his release. I managed to park my car near someone's house and ran back home, pushing my way through the crowd up the hill. At home, my parents were up in arms. My mother was on the phone. Remember, this was a time when there were no handphones, okay? The phone came with a landline, and ours was, colored plastic. It was orange and had Telecom Malaysia plastered on it. And my mother was rehashing the news with her sisters. My sisters were shouting, Ba, liwat tu apa? What is liwat? My mother hung up the phone and asked my father, what was going on? How can the papers write liwat on the front page? We are Malays. We do not use such words. There were students, young people reading these newspapers. My father, who is by nature a calm and quiet man, shouted back at us, if you mention that word again, I will rotan you. That's a bad word. He rolled up the papers and banged them on the dining table. Our cats ran off, and the maids retreated into their rooms at the back. He then sat down on the sofa and cradled his head with his hands. Today is a day we Malays have lost our moral compass. He looked at us after a time. Your mother and I lived through the Japanese occupation, May 13, Independence Day, and now this. I can't believe this happened. I am reminded of that time after hearing of the late Raymond Rashid's death. And whenever I look back at the focus group discussions we had conducted for Iman research, the young Malaysians we met had expressed that they felt disempowered. They lacked social capital. Where did this all come from? How do you get from there to here? Now, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad became our Prime Minister in 1981. I was a wee tiny girl then. He spearheaded many economic drives, wanting to create boomy millionaires and advance the Malay commercial class. 1990s Malaysia was not like how it is now. Women taking to the hijab were shunned and thought of as backwards. This was a time when many Malays, the privileged and the professional Malays, who went off on scholarships and came back to Kuala Lumpur, danced at Tin Mine, a discotheque at the old KL Hilton Hotel at Jalan Sultan Ismail, and Scandals, owned by Rona Drury. She was so famous to all of us, this younger set, like me, many who benefited from the Malaysian government scholarships and, Fama scholarships, father-mother, danced the night away at Faces, 11LA, Beetle Nut, Hard Rock Cafe, and went to work the next day. So now you know how old I am. So for my peers and I, Kuala Lumpur back then was flush with money, success, and great pride. We were all taken by our country's success. Tun Daim Zainuddin mentored a pack of Malay ultra-millionaires like Halim Saad. He was also a man shrouded in secrets and in mystery. But who cared? He was a boomy millionaire, billionaire too. Proton was a car everybody wanted to own. And even though after a year it tanked and croaked on the roads, the word recalcitrant was used by our bosses when we aired. My friends and I just used, very bad words on each other. The heady days of 80s, during Mahathir's time, Anwar's arrest in the 1990s influenced and created the Reformasi movement. And today, when my friends and I discuss that time, that era, we surmise that this could have been seen as a backlash from the grassroots Malays who have already entered and are part of the current middle class. Fed up of the hedonism and freewheeling ways of our corporate titans and elites, the grassroots then, who also benefited from scholarships, decided to rein in the corruption that was happening in the country and push for an Islam Malaysia needs. Success is and was then synonymous with religiosity, they shouted. Their children, who by then were already studying abroad, were telling them of a brand of Islam that was inclusive and popular among American Muslims, and that this would be so good for Malaysia. This sentiment is echoed by Datuk Sopian Ahmad on my Facebook wall sometime in 2017. It's 2020 now. It was different then, Dina, because Orang Kampung were not involved yet. Soon after that era, Orang Kampung came out to towns. They were certified people, thanks to official education policies and initiatives, but lived by the old conservative and traditional values. Perhaps they called such values religion or Islamic. This phenomenal physical transmigration from kampung to urban, coupled with a rejuvenation or a resurgence of Islamic kesedaran, challenged the great parties in central markets, This gave way to angst, against, a lot of the so-called secular liberal Malays then. But this was a different kind of Malay they had to deal with. How do you deal with them? So Anwar's arrest and the first Reformasi movement reflowered Islamic revivalism in Malaysia, which had already poked its head in the form of Al-Arqam 10 years back before it was outlawed. The 1990s Islamic consciousness was really a byproduct of what Kaum Muda promoted in the early 20th century. To be rid of the infidels and the elites, to have an independent Tanah Melayu, you must have Islam. These teachers told our forefathers. And from there on, Islam became a tool at the hands of its people who police this country and citizens who are fed up of all things wrong. Today, our faith has become a capitalist tool of, as well. And that the new generation of Malay Muslims who chanted Reformasi and demanded a revamp of how we govern this country now have children who promote and want a more inclusive and Sharia-compliant brand of their faith. So, I'm done with my 10 minutes. Look out for the book. I should be delivering this to Amir probably February. Thank you very much, everyone. Happy New Year.
Thank you so much, Dina. Well, I've certainly had a lovely time, and I hope all of you have had as well. Remember to always support Malaysian writing. Once again, thank you so much to Sharon for organizing this, and to all our wonderful readers, and also to Param for helping put this video together. Before we leave, I'd like to leave you with this philosophical question. Why is Santa Claus always so jolly? Because he knows where all the bad girls live. So, thank you so much, everybody. For those celebrating, have a Merry Christmas, and to everyone else, have a Happy New Year ahead. Bye!